Hello, and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. Maybe I really am strange. I have always known that I am not like most people. I arrange my books in a perfect order, and if even one of them is moved slightly out of place, I notice it right away. I count my steps without meaning to. I count them on the stairs, on the sidewalk, in the halls at work, and even when I am walking through my own apartment. I never decide to count. It just happens inside my head, like a quiet voice that does not know how to stop. I also have a rule about water. I never drink water while I am eating, not even one small sip. I eat my entire meal first, and only when the plate is empty do I reach for my glass. People have made fun of me for it many times. Friends have laughed and said I act like a machine. My sister once told me I needed help. A co-worker called me obsessive during lunch because I kept moving my fork until it was perfectly straight beside my plate. Maybe they were right. Maybe I have always been a little too careful, too fixed in my ways. But everyone has habits. Some people bite their nails. Some people check their phone every few seconds. Some people cannot sleep unless the room's completely dark. My habits were just part of me. They were small things that made my life feel steady. They made the world feel less messy. At least, that is what I used to believe. 3 months ago, everything changed. It happened on a rainy evening at a small cafe near the train station. I had gone there after work because I did not feel like cooking. The place was not fancy. It had old wooden tables, soft yellow lights, and windows that shook whenever a train passed nearby. The air smelled like coffee, fried food, and wet coats. A few people sat alone with laptops. 2 women were talking quietly near the back. A man in a gray jacket was reading a newspaper by the window. I chose a table near the wall, the same table I usually picked when I went there. I liked sitting where I could see the door. I ordered soup, bread, and grilled chicken. I also ordered a glass of water, even though I knew I would not touch it until I had finished eating. While I waited for my food, I looked around without thinking. That was when I saw him. At first, I thought I was looking at a reflection in a mirror or a window. The cafe lights were strange that night, and the glass beside the door showed twisted images of the room. But then the man moved, and I realized he was not a reflection at all. He was sitting across the cafe, and he looked exactly like me. Not almost like me. Not the way strangers sometimes share the same nose or eyes. He had my face, my skin, my build, my haircut. He was wearing different clothes, but that did not matter. I knew that face better than any face in the world. I saw it every morning in the bathroom mirror. Then I noticed the scar. A small line above the left eyebrow. My scar. I got it when I was 9 years old after falling off my bike and hitting my head on the edge of the sidewalk. It was not a big scar, but it had always been there. Most people did not notice it unless they were close to me. This man had it in the exact same place. The same length, the same shape. My hands went cold. I stared at him, unable to look away. After a few seconds, he turned his head and saw me too. The look on his face told me he was just as shocked as I was. For a long time, neither of us moved. The sounds of the cafe seemed to fade away. Plates clinked somewhere behind me. Someone laughed near the counter. Outside, a train rolled past, and the floor gave a soft shake. but all I could hear was my own breathing. He stared at me. I stared back. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to walk over to him and ask who he was. I wanted to demand an answer. But something inside me stayed frozen. My body refused to move. It felt like if I got closer, the world would break in some way I could never fix. Then the waiter arrived with my food and drink. At almost the same time, another waiter placed a meal in front of the man across the room. I looked down at my plate for 1 second, then back at him. He was doing the same thing. Neither of us touched our glasses of water. We both started eating. That was the first truly strange thing. Not his face, not the scar, not even the fact that he looked like my living copy. It was the water. The glass sat beside his plate, untouched, just like mine. He ate slowly the way I did. He cut his food into careful pieces. He wiped his mouth once after every few bites. His shoulders were slightly tense, just like mine. I watched him as I ate. He watched me, too. We did not smile. We did not wave. We did not speak. We just sat there on opposite sides of the cafe, eating like two men trapped in the same dream. When I finished my meal, I placed my fork down. Across the room, he placed his fork down at the exact same moment. Then we both reached for our glasses. Our fingers touched the glass at the same time. And something changed in his face. His eyes widened in pure terror. Not surprise, not confusion, terror. He looked at the glass, then at me, as if he had just understood something terrible. Before I could react, he pushed back from the table so fast that his chair fell to the floor with a loud crack. Everyone in the cafe turned to look. He did not care. He ran. He rushed toward the door, pushed it open, and disappeared into the wet street outside. The little bell above the door shook wildly after he left. People stared after him. The waiter stood near his table, confused and annoyed. I stayed where I was, my hand still wrapped around my glass of water. I did not drink it. I do not know how long I sat there after that. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. Eventually, I paid my bill and left. The rain had slowed to a fine mist. The station lights shone through it like pale ghosts. I looked up and down the street, but the man was gone. That should have been the end of it. It was not. After that night, I began seeing him everywhere. At first, I told myself it was stress. I told myself my mind was playing tricks on me because the cafe incident had shaken me so badly. But the sightings kept happening. I saw him at the train station 2 days later. He was standing on the opposite platform, half hidden behind a pillar. When I turned fully toward him, he stepped behind a group of people. By the time the crowd moved, he was gone. A week after that, I saw him across the street from my office. He stood near a bus stop with his hands in his coat pockets, looking straight at me through the moving traffic. A red bus passed between us. When it was gone, so was he. Another time, I was in a supermarket, walking down the cereal aisle. I reached for a box, then felt a cold pressure at the back of my neck. The feeling you get when someone is watching you. I looked up and saw him at the far end of the aisle. He was standing perfectly still, one hand resting on a shopping cart. He did not blink. He did not move. I dropped the box and hurried toward him. But before I got halfway down the aisle, a family turned the corner with the loaded cart. For only 1 second, they blocked my view. That was enough. He vanished. I began to dread reflections. Store windows, mirrors, dark glass doors, even the black screen of my phone when it locked. Sometimes I would see a shape behind me, a face that looked too much like mine, and I would spin around only to find empty space. I stopped sleeping well. Every small sound in my apartment made me sit up in bed. Pipes clicking in the walls, a neighbor's footsteps upstairs, wind pressing against the windows. I checked my locks 3 or 4 times every night, then 5 times, then more. I tried to tell myself that I was being ridiculous. I tried to go back to normal. But once you have seen your own face watching you from a crowd, normal becomes impossible. The worst part was that he seemed to be studying me. He never came close. He never spoke. He only watched. But the way he watched felt careful, like he was learning, like he was waiting for something. Sometimes I wondered if he was afraid of me. Sometimes I wondered if I was supposed to be afraid of him. As the weeks passed, my life became smaller. I stopped going out unless I had to. I ordered groceries online. I avoided the cafe near the station. I changed my route to work several times. None of it helped. I still caught glimpses of him. A figure in a crowd, a face in a window, a shadow at the end of a hallway. I started to question everything about myself. Was he my twin? That made no sense. I did not have a twin. My parents would never have hidden something like that from me. Was he some kind of stalker who had changed his face? That sounded insane. But everything sounded insane. Then, yesterday evening, my phone rang. I was sitting on my couch, trying to read, though I had been stuck on the same page for almost 10 minutes. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. When the phone started ringing, I jumped so hard that the book slipped from my hands. The number was unknown. I stared at it until the ringing almost stopped. Then I answered. For 1 second, there was only breathing. Then a voice spoke. It was mine. "Meet me at the railway crossing," he said. My throat closed. I could not speak. He waited a moment, then added, "Tonight." The call ended. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the screen long after it went dark. Every reasonable part of me said not to go. I should have called the police. I should have stayed home and locked every door. I should have left the city. I should have done anything except obey the voice on the phone. But fear does strange things to a person. So does curiosity. For 3 months, I had been watched, followed, haunted by a man with my face. Now he had finally spoken. Now he wanted to meet. I told myself that maybe this was my chance to get answers. Maybe I could end it. Maybe I could look him in the eye and ask him what he was. So I went. The railway crossing was on the edge of town, past the last row of shops and houses. It was not used much at night. A narrow road crossed the tracks, with trees on both sides and a few old streetlights that gave off weak yellow light. Beyond the crossing, the land sloped down toward empty fields. When I arrived, the sun had already set. The sky was dark blue, almost black, and the air had turned cold. Wind moved through the trees, making the branches scrape together like dry bones. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once, then went quiet. I stood near the crossing gate and waited. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I saw him. He was standing on the other side of the tracks, my double. He wore a dark coat. His hair moved slightly in the wind. His face looked tired but calm. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. We just stood there with the rails between us. Up close, he looked even more like me than I remembered. The same eyes, the same small lines near the mouth, the same scar above the eyebrow. Seeing him in the cafe had been terrifying. Seeing him alone in the dark was worse. Finally, he spoke. "One of us has to die." I gave a nervous laugh because my body did not know what else to do. He did not laugh. He only stared at me. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He took one step onto the tracks. "One of us has to die," he repeated. His voice was quiet, but there was no doubt in it. No anger, no excitement, just certainty. A distant horn sounded in the darkness. The train. The rails beneath my feet began to tremble. I looked down the track and saw a light far away, small at first, then growing brighter. The horn came again, louder this time. The crossing lights began to flash red, painting his face, then mine again and again. "Stay back," I said. He kept walking toward me, slowly, purposefully, not running, not attacking, just coming closer with that terrible calm in his eyes. I stepped back. He stepped forward. The train was getting closer now. The sound of it filled the night. Metal screamed on metal. The ground shook harder. The red lights flashed over us like warning signs from another world. "Stop!" I shouted. He did not stop. He was close enough now that I could see his breath in the cold air. His face was not cruel. It was not even angry. It looked sad, almost sorry. That made it worse. My fear turned into panic. He reached out one hand. I do not know what he meant to do. Maybe he wanted to grab me. Maybe he wanted to pull me away. Maybe he wanted to say something. I will never know. Because the moment he came within arm's reach, I shoved him. I pushed him with everything I had. His eyes widened, but not in fear, not in anger, in disappointment. That is the part I cannot forget. That look. It was as if he had hoped I would understand something before it was too late. As if he had given me a chance and I had failed. Then the train hit him. The impact was too fast and too violent for my mind to fully understand. 1 second, he was there, standing in front of me. The next, he was gone beneath the rush of metal and light and deafening sound. I turned away before I could see more. People came running from somewhere nearby. Someone screamed. The train slowed, then stopped farther down the track. I stood near the crossing gate, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. When the police arrived, everyone called it an accident. They asked me what happened. I told them a man had been on the tracks and that I had tried to warn him. I said he stepped too close. I said the train came too fast. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, but no one questioned it. Why would they? There were witnesses who heard me shout. There were flashing lights. There was confusion. There was darkness. Nobody suspected me. Nobody had any reason to suspect me. To everyone else, it was just a tragic accident at a railway crossing. No one knew the dead man had my face. By the time I was allowed to go home, it was late. My body felt empty. My hands still shook. I could still hear the train. I could still see his eyes in the red flashing light. But beneath the horror, there was also a small, terrible relief. It was over. That is what I told myself. For the first time in 3 months, I thought I might finally sleep without seeing him in every shadow. He was gone. Whatever he had been, whoever he had been, he could not follow me anymore. I went home, locked the door, checked the windows, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Then I lay down fully dressed and fell into a heavy, broken sleep. This morning, I woke up late. For a few seconds, I felt normal. The room was quiet. Weak sunlight pressed through the curtains. My mouth was dry, and my head ached, but the apartment felt still. Then I walked into the kitchen and stopped. There was a glass of water on the counter, half empty. I stared at it for a long time. It was my glass, one of the plain, clear ones from the cupboard. It sat beside the sink, with little drops of water running down the outside. Someone had used it recently, but I had not. I knew I had not. The night before, I had gone straight to bed after coming home. I had not eaten anything. And if I had not eaten anything, I would not have poured myself water. I never drank water for no reason at night. I especially never drank it before eating. The glass should not have been there. A cold feeling opened inside my chest. I checked the door. Locked. I checked the windows. Locked. I checked the balcony door. Locked. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. The apartment looked exactly the same as it always did. But the glass was still on the counter, half empty, like a quiet message. Then I remembered the security camera. I had installed it weeks ago after the sightings became too much. It faced the front door and part of the kitchen. I had almost forgotten about it because nothing important had ever appeared on it before. My fingers felt numb as I opened the app on my phone. At first, the footage looked normal. Empty hallway, front door, dark kitchen. The timestamps moved through the night with nothing happening. Then I found the recording from 3:17 a.m. The video began with the front door. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the lock turned. Slowly, the door opened. Someone stepped inside. I stopped breathing. The figure moved quietly into the apartment and closed the door behind him. He did not force it. He did not break anything. He unlocked it like he had a key. For a moment, his face was hidden in the dark. Then he stepped into the kitchen light. It was me. Not someone who looked like me from a distance. Not a stranger with similar features. Me. Every detail was the same. My face, my hair, my shape, my scar. Even the way he stood was familiar. But something about him was wrong. I could feel it even through the screen. He walked to the counter calmly, like he had been there many times before. He picked up the glass of water, then he drank from it. I watched, frozen. He drank before eating anything. The sight made my stomach twist. When he finished, he set the glass down exactly where I had found it. Then he turned his head toward the camera. He knew it was there. For several seconds, he did not move. He just stared into the lens. Then he smiled. It was my face. But it was not my smile. My smile always looked awkward in photos. This one was different. It was slow and sharp and cruel. It looked like the smile of someone who had been waiting a long time to be understood. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He opened it and held it up to the camera. I leaned closer to the phone screen, my hand shaking so hard the image blurred. 4 words were written on the paper in thick black marker. You pushed the one. I read the words again and again. You pushed the one. Before leaving, the man lowered the paper. Then he looked directly into the camera once more. Very slowly, he raised one hand and tapped the scar above his eyebrow. My scar. The scar I thought only I had. Then he turned and left the apartment. The footage ended. I watched it again. Then again. Then again. 6 times in total. Every time I hoped I had missed something. I hoped there was some detail that would explain it. A mask, a trick of the light, a difference in his face. A sign that this was still the same man from the cafe, somehow alive. But there was nothing. Only the glass. Only the smile. Only the words. You pushed the one. And then I noticed the thing that made my blood feel like ice. The man in the video drank the water before eating anything. That was not my habit. That was not something I would ever do. And it was not something the other man had done either. The man in the cafe had waited. He had eaten his whole meal first, just like me. He had followed the habit perfectly. He had reached for his glass at the exact same moment I did. At the railway crossing, the man I pushed had the same scar, the same face, and the same fear. He had known something. He had tried to warn me. Maybe he had even tried to save me. But I panicked. I pushed him. I pushed the one. The one who was like me. The one who followed my habits. The one who might have been real. Which means the man who came into my apartment at 3:17 a.m. is something else. And if the message is true, then the person I killed at the railway crossing was not the copy. He was the original. Story 2. I was working as a DoorDash driver late one night in the suburbs outside Detroit, Michigan. I was out in Romulus, not far from the airport. If you know that area, then you know how strange it can feel after midnight. Some roads are empty for miles, and once you leave the main streets behind, everything turns dark and quiet in a way that makes your skin crawl. The streetlights get farther apart. The houses sit far back from the road. And sometimes it feels like the whole world has gone still. That night, it was almost 1 in the morning, and it was raining hard enough to blur the windshield every few seconds. I had already been driving for hours, and I was tired. My back hurt from sitting too long, and my eyes felt dry and heavy from focusing on the road. I had decided I was done for the night. I was ready to head home, take off my wet shoes, and fall straight into bed. Then one last order popped up on the app. It was a large order, and the pay looked good. I remember staring at the screen and thinking about how one more delivery would make the night worth it. I hesitated for a few seconds, but in the end, I accepted it. At first, nothing about it seemed too unusual. People place late-night food orders all the time, especially around airport areas where workers keep odd hours. I picked up the food from a restaurant that was still open near the main road. It was a big order, several bags in total, warm and packed carefully. I loaded everything into my car and looked at the delivery instructions before driving off. That was the first moment my stomach tightened. There was no house number. There was only a street name. I frowned and checked again, thinking maybe the app had glitched or I had missed something. But no, there was really no number, just the street. Then I looked at the customer notes. They read, "Leave the order at the large wooden gate at the end of the road. Don't knock. Don't call. I'll be waiting." I remember reading that note 3 times. It was strange, but not strange enough for me to cancel the order. I told myself maybe the customer lived on private property and didn't want the dogs barking or the kids waking up. People can be weird, and delivery drivers learn not to question everything. So I shrugged it off and followed the map. At first, the route seemed normal. I drove past small homes, closed businesses, and long stretches of wet road shining under the headlights. The rain kept falling, steady and cold, and the wipers pushed it back in a dull rhythm that was oddly comforting. But as I kept going, the neighborhood began to change. The houses became fewer and farther apart. The roads grew narrower. The lights disappeared. Before long, I was driving through an area that felt more like the edge of a forest than a suburb. The app told me to keep going. Eventually, the pavement ended, and my tires rolled onto a dirt path. I slowed down right away. Mud splashed under the car, and branches hung close to the road, brushing against the sides of my Honda. The trees grew thick on both sides, dark and tall, their branches reaching over the road like bent arms. My headlights only showed a few feet ahead. Beyond that, there was nothing but blackness and rain. I checked the app again. The route still said I was heading the right way. I kept driving deeper into the woods, and with every minute, I felt more uneasy. It didn't make sense. Why would anyone order food out here, especially this late? I thought maybe there had to be a farmhouse or some hidden property farther in. But even then, the silence around me felt wrong. I couldn't see any porch lights, no mailboxes, no trash cans, no tire tracks. Nothing that suggested people actually lived there. Just trees, mud, and darkness. Then Google Maps froze for a second, recalculated, and stopped completely. The route had ended. I found myself parked in front of a massive rusty iron gate. It rose out of the darkness like something ancient, tall and cold, with bars thick enough to belong outside a prison. Behind it, set a little farther back, was another gate made of wood. The wood looked old and rotten, warped with age, dark from rain and decay. Everything about it looked abandoned. On the ground near the entrance, half hidden by weeds and mud, was a crooked old sign. I had to lean forward to read it through the rain. It said, "No trespassing. Private property." The words looked like they had been written by hand in shaky black ink. I sat there for a moment, staring at it, feeling the food bags cooling in the passenger seat beside me. My first thought was to leave. My second thought was that I had already come all this way, and the customer had probably been tracking me. Maybe if I just dropped the order at the gate and left, it would be over in less than a minute. So I took a breath, grabbed the food, pulled up my hood, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit me right away. The dirt sucked at my shoes, and rainwater slid down the back of my neck. I hurried toward the wooden gate, holding the bags carefully so they wouldn't tip. The moment I got close, I realized just how silent everything was. I don't mean quiet. I mean silent in a way that feels unnatural. No insects, no distant cars, no barking dogs, no airplane sound. Even though the airport wasn't that far away, just the rain falling and the sound of my own breathing. I set the bags down near the wooden gate like the note had instructed. I remember straightening up and feeling this huge urge to run back to the car. Every part of me was telling me that something about the place was wrong. I had delivered to strange locations before, but this felt different. It felt watched. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A scraping sound came from just behind the gate. It was slow and rough, like solid metal being dragged across concrete. The sound cut through the rain and made me freeze in place. I stood there, every muscle tight, waiting for something to move on the other side. Then I heard a voice. It was not a normal voice. It was faint, dry and low, almost like a whisper coming from underground. It said, "Put it in the box. Inside." For a second, I couldn't even understand what I'd heard. My eyes moved across the dark ground beyond the gate, searching for anyone standing there. I didn't see a person. I didn't see a flashlight. I didn't see any shape I could clearly make out. Then, near the base of the wooden gate, off to one side and partly buried in dirt, I noticed an old wooden chest. It looked like a military ammo crate, the kind you might see in an old war movie. It was long and low, stained by age, with splintered corners and patches of dark rot. There was a rusted metal lock on it, but it wasn't like any lock I had seen before. It was large and oddly shaped, almost decorative, like something much older than the crate itself. I just stared at it. The voice did not speak again, but I felt an awful pressure in the air, like I was being expected to obey. A cold wave of fear washed over me. Every instinct I had screamed not to touch that box, not to step any closer, not to even stay there another second. I decided right then that I didn't care about the rating, the money, or the order. I was leaving the food on the ground and getting out. I backed away from the gate without taking my eyes off it, then turned and hurried to my car. By the time I slammed the door shut, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. I shoved the key into the ignition and turned it. Click. Nothing else? I blinked, confused, and tried again. Click. The engine didn't turn over, not even a weak start. Just a dead, hard click. My heart started pounding. My Honda was old, sure, but it had never failed me like that. Never. I tried again, pressing the gas, turning the key harder, as if that would help. Click. Still nothing. That was when I looked into the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just rain reflecting light from somewhere. But then I realized it was moving. Deep in the trees behind the gate, I saw a tiny light, dim and pale like a weak flashlight. It drifted between the trunks slowly, coming closer. But it wasn't moving the way a person walks. It swayed from side to side in a jerking, uneven rhythm, like it was being carried by something that didn't move like a human being. I stared at it, unable to breathe. It came closer. The light dipped, rose, swayed, paused, then moved again. The rhythm of it made my stomach twist. There was something terribly wrong with the way it moved. I began hitting the steering wheel with the heel of my hand and whispering, then saying, then almost shouting at the car to start. My voice sounded weak and high in the small space of the car. Then suddenly, the light went out. Just like that. One moment it was there, drifting through the trees toward me. The next moment, total darkness. I stopped moving. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. I stared into the mirror, waiting for the light to come back. But it didn't. All I could see was the black wall of rain and trees behind me. Then I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. Click. It was the sound of the wooden chest opening. The lid creaked upward slowly with a long, dry groan of wood rubbing against wood. But the sound didn't seem to come from the gate anymore. It came from the right side of my car. I felt every hair on my arms and neck rise. I did not turn my head. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see if I looked through the passenger window. I sat completely still, staring straight ahead through the rain-streaked windshield, while the sound of that lid opening dragged on beside me. Then came the smell. It slipped into the car little by little, as if through some invisible crack. It was thick and foul, the smell of old meat left in heat, mixed with wet earth and something sickly sweet. It made my eyes water. I gagged and covered my mouth, but I didn't move otherwise. I was too scared. A few seconds later, I heard breathing. Heavy breathing. Slow, freezing breaths, right outside the window. Not an animal sound. Not the panting of a dog. This was deeper, wet, and deliberate. Like something large was standing inches away from the glass and pulling air into ruined lungs. Then came the tapping. Soft at first. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like fingernails touching the passenger window, long and careful, tracing the glass. The taps had a strange rhythm, almost thoughtful, like whatever was outside was not trying to get in yet. It was letting me know it was there. I still didn't turn. I remember tears filling my eyes from fear. My chest hurt. I couldn't get a full breath. I fumbled for my phone with one hand, thinking I could call someone, anyone, but my fingers were numb. Then I saw there was no signal anyway, no bars at all. The tapping moved. It went from the passenger window to the rear window. Tap, 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 then back again. And each time, the breathing followed. I tried the ignition again. Click. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound had been. I became aware of one thing then, and it nearly broke me. I could hear tiny scratches now, like nails dragging very slowly along the outside of the car door. They slid from the back toward the front, leaving faint screeching sounds on the metal. I squeezed my eyes shut and turned the key one more time. This time the engine roared to life. I didn't think. I didn't look. I slammed the car into reverse so hard I almost spun into a ditch, then forced it forward and stomped on the gas. The car jumped down the dirt path, tires sliding in mud, branches scraping both sides. I drove like a man being chased through hell. I nearly hit 2 trees on the way out, and more than once I thought I was going to lose control. But I did not slow down, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. Not once. By the time I reached a paved road, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I drove for another 15 minutes before pulling into a gas station with bright lights and other people around. I sat there with the engine running, staring straight ahead, trying to understand what had just happened. My clothes were wet. My mouth tasted sour. My hands smelled like cold metal from gripping the wheels so tightly. I didn't report the order to DoorDash. I didn't call the police. I didn't do anything that made sense. I was too frightened and too confused to think clearly. I just went home, locked every door, checked every window twice, and spent the rest of the night awake in bed with the lights on. The next morning, after almost no sleep, I convinced myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe I had panicked. Maybe the box had been some old delivery drop. Maybe an animal had been outside the car. Fear can twist ordinary things into monsters, especially late at night in the rain. I wanted to believe that. So I opened my laptop and checked the address again. I pulled up the route from the app and matched it with online maps and county records. What I found made my stomach drop. The dead-end road I had driven down did not appear in current official records at all. In fact, according to archived property information, that road had been closed off in 1990. A property once stood there, hidden behind private gates. But after a strange case involving the disappearance of an entire family, the road had supposedly been shut down and removed from use. An entire family. Gone. No clear answers. The house had later been listed as uninhabitable, then abandoned and eventually no longer included on updated maps. I just sat there staring at the screen, reading the same lines over and over. I even checked older map layers and local forum posts. Some people mentioned rumors about the property. Others claimed the place had burned down years ago. One person said nobody had lived there in decades. But what disturbed me most was simple. By all records, I should not have been able to take a normal delivery order there at all. I told myself I was done thinking about it. Then I took my car to a mechanic. I hadn't planned to at first, but during the drive home from the gas station that night, I kept hearing a faint flapping sound near the back tire. I assumed maybe a branch or some trash had gotten caught underneath. The mechanic lifted the car and called me over a few minutes later. His face looked puzzled. He had found something jammed into the rear tire tread. It was a thin wooden splinter, dark with age and dampness, like it had broken off from old rotten wood. Wrapped around it was a strip of cloth. The cloth was stiff. Brown-red stains covered parts of it, dried blood. My stomach turned so sharply I had to grab the edge of the workbench to steady myself. "Where did you drive last night?" the mechanic asked. I couldn't answer. He handed the thing to me with a rag, and when I unwrapped the cloth, I saw writing on it. The letters were shaky and uneven, as if written by an unsteady hand. It said, "This wasn't your last order." For a long time after that, I tried to move on with my life. I stopped doing late-night deliveries. Then I stopped doing delivery work altogether. I told friends I got tired of the hours. I told my family I wanted something safer. I never told anyone the full truth because every time I tried, the words sounded insane even to me. But the nightmare didn't end there. At first, it was just little things. When I drove alone at night, I felt watched. Empty roads made my chest tighten. If I passed a tree line or a dark fence, I would grip the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I started using my rearview mirror less and less, because sometimes, in the reflection, I thought I saw movement in the back seat. Not clearly. Never clearly. Just a shape. A darkness darker than the rest. The first time I saw it, I nearly drove off the road. I jerked the car over and turned around, expecting to find someone hiding there. But the back seat was empty. The second time, I saw what looked like a narrow, pale hand resting on the top of the seat behind me. When I spun around, nothing was there. After that, I started keeping the inside light on whenever I drove at night, just so I could see the back seat without using the mirror. It didn't help, because now sometimes when I look in the mirror on dark roads, I see a faint figure standing far behind my car in the road. It doesn't chase me. It doesn't run. It simply stands there in the darkness, almost blending into it, with shoulders too narrow and arms too long. Even from a distance, I can make out one thing clearly: its hand. It lifts one hand slowly and points at me with long, thin fingers. And then every so often, when the road is empty and the night is silent, I hear it again. Tap, 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 tap. Soft, careful taps against the glass. I have checked the windows over and over. There is never anything there, but the sound keeps coming back. Sometimes it comes from the passenger side. Sometimes from the rear window. Once, it came from directly above me while I was driving under a clear sky with no branches anywhere near the car. I barely sleep now. When I do, I dream of that gate, that rain, and that wooden chest opening beside me. In the dream, I always make the mistake I avoided in real life. I always turn my head and look out the window. And just before I wake up, I see something leaning close to the glass, breathing fog onto it from the outside, smiling with a mouth too wide to be human. I don't know what was behind those gates that night. I don't know who placed that order or if anyone ever really wanted food. I don't know what climbed out of that box or whether it followed me home from that dead road outside Romulus. All I know is that some part of that place is still with me. And even now, years later, whenever I drive at night on an empty road and happen to glance into the rearview mirror, I sometimes see that faint shadow waiting in the dark, pointing at me as if I still owe it something. And deep down, I am terrified that I do, because I have the sick feeling that the message on that blood-stained cloth was true. That delivery was not my last order. It was only the first. Story 3. I work the closing shift at a supermarket on the edge of town. It is not a huge store, but it is big enough to feel empty at night. The kind of place that stays open until midnight, even though most people stop coming in after 10. By 11:30, the lights seem too bright. The aisles look too long, and every small sound carries farther than it should. My job is simple. After the final announcement plays over the speakers, I walk through every aisle and make sure no customers are still inside. Then I check the bathrooms, the back hallway, the doors near the stockroom, and the emergency exits. After that, I lock the front doors, set the alarm, and go home. Most nights, nobody is there. Most nights, the store is quiet, boring, and harmless. But not always. The first time I saw him was on a Tuesday night. I remember it because Tuesdays were usually the slowest nights of the week. There were no families rushing in for last-minute groceries, no college kids buying snacks, No tired parents trying to get milk before morning. It was just me, a cashier finishing her drawer, and one of the night stalkers in the back. I started my final walk around 11:50 p.m. The closing announcement had already played twice. The front doors were locked from the outside, but customers could still leave from the inside. I had done this same walk hundreds of times, so I was barely thinking about it. I just moved aisle by aisle, glancing down each one, checking for movement. When I reached aisle 12, the pet food section, I stopped. A man was standing at the far end of the aisle. He was facing the shelves with his back slightly turned to me. He wore a dark jacket, dark pants, and a gray hat pulled low over his face. In one hand, he held one of our blue plastic shopping baskets. He was standing so still that for a second I thought he might be a cardboard display or some kind of shadow. I called out, "Sir, we're closing in a few minutes." He did not answer. He did not turn his head. He did not even shift his weight. I took a few steps closer. The aisle smelled like dry dog food and cardboard. The lights hummed above me. My shoes made soft squeaking sounds against the polished floor. I called out again, louder this time. "Sir, the store is closing." Still nothing. I kept walking until I was about 10 feet away from him. That was when he finally moved. He did not jump or look surprised. He just turned away from the shelf and started walking toward the front of the store. He walked fast, but not like someone running away. His steps were smooth and quiet. I followed him because I wanted to make sure he left before I locked up. But by the time I reached the registers, he was gone. The cashier looked up at me and asked if everything was okay. I asked if a man in a gray hat had just walked out. She shook her head and said she had not seen anyone. I checked the front doors. They were still locked from the inside. I checked the nearest emergency exit, thinking maybe he had slipped out that way. But it was closed, and the alarm had not gone off. I told myself he must have found another way out. Maybe I missed him. Maybe the cashier was looking down when he passed. It was late. We were both tired. Things like that happen. At least that is what I told myself. The next night I saw him again. This time he was in the frozen food aisle. It was almost the same exact time, close to midnight. I was doing my final walk when I saw him standing beside the glass freezer doors, holding the same blue basket. The freezers were humming loudly, and the glass doors were covered in a thin mist. For a moment, I could see his reflection more clearly than his actual body. Same dark jacket, same gray hat, same still posture. I felt annoyed before I felt scared. I thought he was one of those customers who ignored every announcement because they believed the store existed only for them. I said, "Sir, you need to head to the front now. We're closed." Just like the night before, he did not answer. I walked closer. And just like the night before, when I got near him, he turned and walked away. This time I hurried after him. I was not running, but I was moving fast enough that my keys slapped against my hip. I turned the corner toward the registers only a few seconds after he did. He was gone again. The front doors had not opened. The cashier had not seen him. The emergency exits were still sealed. No alarm, no open door, no sign of him anywhere. That was when I started to feel uneasy. I mentioned it to my manager the next day. Her name was Linda, and she had worked at that store for almost 20 years. She had seen every kind of weird customer you could imagine, so I expected her to take it seriously. Instead, she just shrugged. "Probably someone hiding before closing," she said. "Kids do that sometimes." I told her this was not a kid. It was a grown man. She said, "Then do your walk earlier. Don't give him time to mess around." That was the end of the conversation. On the third night, I did exactly what she said. I started my walk earlier. I checked the aisles at 11:40, then again at 11:50. At first, I saw nothing. I thought maybe he would not show up. Then I reached aisle 7, the cleaning supplies aisle. He was there. It was 11:55 p.m. He stood in front of the shelves with bleach, floor cleaner, paper towels, and dish soap. The smell in that aisle was always sharp and chemical, but that night, it seemed stronger than usual. He was facing the shelves again, holding the basket at his side. I did not call out this time. I stood at the end of the aisle and watched him. For almost 2 full minutes, he did not move at all. Not a twitch. Not a breath that I could see. The store was so quiet, I could hear the buzz from the lights above us. I could hear the distant rumble of the refrigerators. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Then, without warning, he turned and walked out of sight. I followed him right away. He was gone before I reached the next aisle. That was when I stopped trying to explain it as normal. The next day, I asked Linda if we could check the security cameras. She rolled her eyes at first. She acted like I was wasting her time. But I kept pushing, and finally she took me into the little security room behind the office. The room was small and always too warm. There were old monitors on the desk, wires hanging behind them, and a smell like dust and burnt coffee. Linda pulled up the footage from the first night. We found the timestamp. 9:47 p.m., aisle 12. At first, the aisle was empty. There were bags of dog food stacked neatly on the shelves, cans of cat food on the lower rows, and the polished floor shining under the lights. Then the picture jumped. Not much. Just one small shift between frames. 1 second, the aisle was empty. The next second, the man was there. He did not walk in from either end. He did not step out from behind a display. He simply appeared in the middle of the aisle, already holding the basket. Linda did not say anything. I looked at her. Her face had changed. She was still trying to look bored, but her mouth had tightened, and her eyes were fixed on the screen. "Rewind it," I said. She did. We watched it again. Empty aisle, one blink of video, then the man. We checked the entrance cameras. Nobody matching his description came into the store after 6 p.m. We checked the side doors and the employee entrance. Nothing. We checked the front registers. Nothing. Linda leaned back in her chair and said, "It's probably a glitch." But her voice did not sound sure anymore. After that, I started watching for him every night. It became a routine, though not one I wanted. He would appear somewhere in the store between 9:45 and 9:50 p.m. Always a different aisle, sometimes canned goods, sometimes paper products, sometimes dairy, sometimes frozen food. He never spoke to anyone. He never put anything into his basket. He never took anything out. He just stood there facing the shelves as if he were trying to choose something. Always alone, always still, and always gone when I got too close. For a while, I thought maybe he was harmless. Strange, yes, but harmless. He never attacked anyone. He never stole anything. He never bothered the customers. Most people did not even seem to notice him. I once watched a woman push her cart straight past the aisle he was standing in. She glanced down the aisle, looked right through him, and kept walking like nothing was there. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. One night, I got brave. Or stupid. Maybe both. I hid behind the dairy cooler near the glass doors where we kept the milk and cream. From there, I could see across the end of aisle 4 where the canned goods were. I waited there before 9:45, pretending to check the dates on milk cartons. At 9:47, he appeared. Not walked in, not came around the corner, appeared. He was standing in aisle 4 with the basket in his hand. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. He looked like a man in his mid-40s. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, no beard, no real expression. His eyes looked dull, not dead exactly, but empty in a way that made my stomach turn. He looked like a person who had forgotten why he had come somewhere, but was still waiting to remember. Then I looked at the basket. I had never paid close attention to what he was carrying before. I had always been too focused on him. But that night, through the glass doors of the dairy cooler, I saw the items clearly. There were 6 things inside: a bag of dry dog food, a box of frozen peas, a bottle of bleach, a can of beef stew, a pack of light bulbs, and a small yellow box. The yellow box bothered me right away, though at first I did not know why. It looked familiar in a way that made the back of my mind itch. It had red letters and a shiny little star on the front. I stared at it for a long time before the memory came back. It was a box of dishwasher powder called Shine Light. My grandmother used to buy it when I was a kid. I remembered it because she loved that brand and complained for years after they stopped making it. She said the newer brands never cleaned the same way. I could still picture the yellow box under her kitchen sink. But Shine Light had been discontinued in 2009. The box in his basket looked new. Not old, not dusty, not faded, new. The next night, I told Linda about the yellow box. This time, she did not roll her eyes. She took me to the security room without much argument, and we started checking old CCTV archives. The system was ancient, but for some reason, the store had saved years of footage. Most of it was useless, stored in old backup drives. But Linda knew where everything was. She said corporate made them keep more than they needed, and no one ever bothered deleting it. We pulled up footage from 2008. Aisle 12, 9:47 p.m. There he was. Same man, same jacket, same gray hat, same basket, same 6 items. I felt cold all over. Linda clicked through more dates. Random nights from 2008, then 2009, then 2010, then 2015, then 2020. Every time we checked, he was there. The same face, the same clothes, the same basket. He did not look older. He did not look younger. He looked exactly the same in every recording. For 16 years, that man had been appearing in the store every night. I asked Linda if she had ever seen him before. She did not answer right away. Then she said, "I don't know." But I could tell she was lying. I asked if we should call someone. The police, corporate, anyone. She said she would handle it. The next week, she quit. No notice, no goodbye. She just stopped showing up. Someone said she had left because of family problems. Someone else said she moved out of state. I never found out the truth. Her office was cleaned out by the end of the week. The new manager was a man named Carl. He did not care about anything unless it affected sales or got him in trouble. When I told him about the man, the footage, and the basket, he laughed like I was trying to scare him. As long as he isn't stealing, it isn't my problem, Carl said. I told him the man had been appearing on camera for years. Carl said, "Then he sounds like a loyal customer." After that, I stopped bringing it up. I also stopped approaching the man. For weeks, I did my job and pretended not to see him. I would make my final announcement, walk the aisles, and if I saw him standing there, I would turn around and check somewhere else first. I acted like he was part of the store, like a broken freezer door or a stain on the ceiling tile. Something strange but permanent. And for a while, that worked. He stood there. I ignored him. He disappeared before closing. I locked the doors and went home. But last night was different. I started my final walk at 11:50 p.m. like always. I went through aisle 1, then aisle 2, then aisle 3. I checked frozen foods, canned goods, paper products, cleaning supplies, cereal, snacks, dairy, drinks, and pet food. I checked every aisle twice. He was not there. At first I felt fear, then slowly I felt relief. For the first time in months, the store felt normal again. Empty, quiet, and boring. I remember standing near the registers and smiling to myself. I told myself maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been happening had finally stopped. I locked the front doors. I set the alarm. I walked out to my car under the parking lot lights. The night air felt cold and fresh, and for once, I did not look back at the store before driving away. This morning, I came in early. I do not know why. Maybe part of me did not believe it was over. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I had spent too many nights watching that man to accept that he was just gone. I went straight to the security room and pulled up the footage from last night. 9:47 p.m., aisle 12. The customer appeared as usual. Same clothes, same hat, same basket. He stood there for about a minute. Then he did something I had never seen him do before. He walked toward the back of the store, not toward the registers, not toward the front doors, toward the stockroom. I felt my stomach sink. The stockroom cameras have been broken for years. Everyone knows it. The old manager had asked for them to be fixed more than once, but corporate never approved it. Carl said it was not worth the money. So the footage showed the man walking out of view. Then nothing. At 10:02 p.m., he came back into view. He was still holding the basket. He walked slowly back to aisle 12. Then he stopped in the middle of the floor and looked down at the basket. His face was still blank. He bent slightly and placed the basket on the floor. Then he straightened up and walked toward the front doors. I watched him reach them. He pushed them open. The alarm did not go off. The doors opened like they were not locked at all. He stepped outside, and the parking lot camera caught him for 1 second, before the glare from the lights swallowed him. He never came back in. But the basket stayed. It sat in the middle of aisle 12 for the rest of the night. Hours passed on the recording. Employees left. The lights dimmed slightly after closing. The Night Stalker moved through the back of the store, but he never went near aisle 12. No customers came near it. Nobody touched it. Then the timestamp reached 11:58 p.m. There I was on the camera doing my final walk. I watched myself walk past aisle 12. I stopped at the end of the aisle and looked straight down it. Then I kept walking. I had not seen the basket. On the camera, it was clear as day. It was right there in the middle of the floor, bright blue plastic against the white tiles. But I walked past it like it did not exist. I watched that part again 3 times. Each time, the same thing happened. The basket was there. I did not see it. I am in the security room now as I write this. I pulled up the live feed for aisle 12, and the basket is still there. Same blue plastic. Same place on the floor. After staring at the screen for almost 20 minutes, I finally went down to look at it in person. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the shelf as I walked. When I reached aisle 12, I saw it. Not on the camera this time. With my own eyes, the basket sat in the middle of the aisle like someone had just placed it there a second ago. It looked ordinary. That was the worst part. It was not glowing. It was not covered in dust. It did not look cursed or rotten or old. It looked like any other shopping basket. Inside were the 6 items: dog food, frozen peas, bleach, beef stew, light bulbs, the yellow box of Shine Light dishwasher powder. I crouched down and picked up the yellow box first. It felt real. It had weight. The cardboard was smooth under my fingers. The label was bright and clean. There was no dust on it at all. Then I turned it over. On the back was a small white sticker. It said, "Discontinued 2009. I checked the others. Every single item had the same kind of sticker. The dog food brand had changed its formula in 2009. The frozen peas came from a company that had gone out of business. The bleach bottle had a label design that had not been printed in 11 years. The beef stew can had a pull-tab top, the old kind that stopped being used around 2008. The light bulbs were incandescent bulbs, the kind that had been banned for sale in this state years ago. Everything in the basket was old, dead stock, things that should not have been in any store anymore, things that should not have existed in that condition. I put the yellow box back carefully. Then I counted the items again because something felt wrong. There were only 5. I counted again. Still 5. The dog food was missing. At first, I thought I had moved it without realizing. I checked the floor around the basket. I looked under the shelves. I pushed aside bags of current dog food and checked behind them. I got down on my hands and knees and looked under the bottom rack. Nothing. The dog food was gone. I ran back to the security room and checked the footage. When the man set the basket down at 10:02 p.m., all 6 items were inside. The dog food was there, clear and visible. At 10:15 p.m., the footage glitched for a single frame. Just one frame. When the picture came back, the bag of dog food was gone. No one touched the basket. No one walked into the aisle. It simply vanished. I have been sitting in the security room for over an hour now, staring at the live feed. The basket has not moved. There are 5 items inside. I searched for every item online. I checked old product pages, recall notices, grocery forms, anything I could find. The frozen peas were discontinued in 2009. The bleach label was retired in 2009. The beef stew company changed packaging in 2009. Shine Light dishwasher powder was discontinued in 2009. The light bulbs were removed from shelves later, but the pack design in the basket stopped being sold in 2009, and the dog food was worse than discontinued. It had been recalled. There was a manufacturing error. The recall notice said every bag from that batch was supposed to be destroyed in 2009. Not removed from shelves, destroyed. There should not be a single unopened bag left anywhere. But there was one. For 16 years, it had been in that basket every night. And now it is gone. I do not know what the basket is. I do not know why he carried those items. I do not know who the man was or where he went after he walked out the front doors last night. I do not know what happened in the stockroom during those missing minutes. But I keep thinking about the way he left the basket behind, like he was finished with it, like it was not his problem anymore. I do not know what happens when the basket is empty. I do not know how long that will take, but I just checked the live feed again. There are only 4 items now. The frozen peas are gone. The timestamp says it happened 3 minutes ago. And this time, I did not see the footage glitch. Story 4. I am writing this from the public library in Quarryville because it is the only place where I can use my phone without my parents knowing. By the time you read this, I will already be home. My real name does not matter. It is better if you do not know it. But if you need to call me something, you can call me Elsie. I am 16 years old. I was raised Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in a house without electricity, without television, without the internet, and without all the bright little things people outside our community carry in their pockets. I grew up between cornfields, dairy barns, gravel lanes, and narrow roads where cars slow down behind our buggies. Sometimes people take pictures of us through their windows like we are not real people, but something from a museum or a fair. They point cameras at our horses, our clothes, our hats, our homes. They smile like they're seeing something sweet and old-fashioned. They never understand that this life is not a costume. It is our world. Most people outside the community think they understand Rumspringa, but they do not. They hear the word and imagine wild Amish teenagers running free, drinking, dancing, sneaking into clubs, wearing modern clothes, and trying every forbidden thing before they get married and settle down. They think it is some kind of Amish gone wild, like a secret door opens and we all run through it laughing. That is not how it is for most of us. Rumspringa means running around in Pennsylvania Dutch. It is the time before baptism, when a young person is old enough to see more of the English world. That is what we call the world outside ours. The English world has phones, cars, music, movies, bright stores, fast food, electric lights, and people who seem to be in a hurry even when they are standing still. During Rumspringa, we are allowed to look at that world more closely. Then we choose. Do we stay with the people who raised us? Do we speak our home language, follow the ordnung, live simply, marry, work, worship, and become part of the church forever? Or do we leave knowing that leaving is not just moving away, but breaking away from nearly everyone and everything we have ever known? People outside think it must be an easy choice. It is not. The English world is frightening, but it is also beautiful. It is loud, bright, confusing, and full of things that make you feel like you have been asleep your whole life. There are stores where the shelves never seem to end. There are roads full of cars moving faster than horses could ever run. There are little screens that hold music, voices, faces, maps, and messages from people you have never met. There is a strange kind of magic in it, and I wanted to see it. One Friday, a couple of months ago, I thought I had made my choice. I was staying with a Mennonite family for a little while. They were not Amish like us, but close enough that my parents trusted them. One of their daughters was a few years older than me. She had a car, a phone, and a way of speaking that made the English world sound less frightening. She had already been to malls, restaurants, movie theaters, and all the places I had only heard about in whispers. That Friday afternoon, she drove me to Park City Center, the mall. I had never been inside a mall before. The first thing I noticed was the light. It was everywhere. It came from the ceiling, from shop windows, from signs, from screens, from displays, from glass cases full of jewelry and shining things I did not know how to name. The floor was so polished that I could see pieces of myself in it as I walked. My plain dress, my black shoes, my white cap, my frightened eyes. The air smelled like cinnamon sugar, perfume, cleaning spray, and food from places with names I had never heard. People moved around me in every kind of clothing. Jeans with holes in them, shirts that showed shoulders, shoes that flashed colors, women with painted nails, men with earrings, children holding drinks in cups larger than anything we used at home. No one looked at one another for long. Everyone seemed busy, but no one seemed to be working. I felt like I had stepped into a world built only to tempt people. My friend laughed when she saw my face. She bought me a soft pretzel. It was warm, salty, and buttery, and I ate it too fast, burning the roof of my mouth. Then she helped me buy a cheap phone from a small store near the center of the mall. It was not an expensive one, but it felt impossible to me. A little black rectangle that could open doors to places I had never been. I kept touching it in my pocket as we walked. It felt alive. For a while, I forgot to be afraid. I looked into shop windows. I stared at mannequins wearing clothes I could never imagine putting on my body. I watched teenagers my age laugh together, carrying bags and drinks, wearing their hair loose, speaking loudly without looking over their shoulders. I wondered what it would feel like to be one of them. Near closing time, the mall changed. The bright, busy feeling began to drain away. People left in waves. Workers pulled metal gates down over store entrances. Music still played somewhere overhead, but it sounded thinner now, like it was coming from very far away. The open spaces that had felt exciting before began to feel too large. I turned to say something to my friend, but she was not beside me. At first, I thought she had gone into a store. I waited near a bench. Then I walked a little farther, looking through the closing shops. My phone had no service, or maybe I did not understand how to use it. I pressed the screen again and again, but nothing useful happened. More gates came down. The mall became quieter. I saw a yellow sign near the restrooms that said exit. I felt relief so strong it almost made me cry. I pushed through the door. On the other side, there was no parking lot. There was no night air. There were no cars, no streetlights, no sound of traffic, no friend waiting outside. There was only a room. It was about the size of a meeting house, but the ceiling was low enough to make the air feel pressed down. The wallpaper was faded and printed with tiny blue flowers. The carpet was the color of old oatmeal. Fluorescent lights hummed above me, giving everything a sick yellow glow. The air smelled like damp straw and warm plastic. I turned back at once. The door was gone. Not closed, not locked. Gone. There was only more wallpaper behind me, smooth and faded, with those tiny blue flowers repeating over and over. For a while, I stood completely still. My hand stayed lifted in the air where the door handle should have been. I told myself I was confused. I told myself malls were strange places, and maybe I had taken a wrong turn into some back hallway or storage area. But there was no exit sign now. There was no sound from the mall, only the buzzing lights. I had nowhere to go but forward. The next room looked almost the same, but not exactly. The wallpaper had the same blue flowers, but they were larger. The carpet felt softer under my shoes. Wooden chairs were lined up in rows, all facing a blank wall. The chairs reminded me of church benches, but there were too many, and all of them were empty. The room after that had metal shelves. On the shelves were quilts folded in neat piles. The stitching was careful and familiar. I knew those patterns from home. I knew the patience it took to make them. But the colors were wrong. Some were too bright, too sharp, too deep. Colors I did not have names for. Colors that seemed to move when I looked away. In another room, a buggy wheel turned slowly by itself. It was standing upright in the middle of the carpet, not attached to anything. It spun and creaked softly, like an old man breathing in his sleep. That was when I heard the breathing. Not ahead of me, not behind me, beside me. I turned quickly. There was only wallpaper. But at the edge of my sight, something moved. It was tall and pale, bent forward like a man who had spent his whole life chained in a cellar. I saw the shape of a shoulder, the suggestion of a long arm, something too thin and too still. When I looked directly at it, it was gone. My heart began to pound so hard that I could feel it in my throat. I walked faster. The lights flickered. In that flicker, I saw my mother's kitchen through an open doorway. The sight hit me so hard I stopped breathing. There was the oil lamp on the table. There were 2 bowls of applesauce set out for my little brothers, with the spoons resting beside them, untouched. There was my father's hat hanging on the peg by the door. I could even smell bread cooling on the counter. Home. I ran to it. The doorway stretched away from me. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then I realized the hallway between me and the kitchen was growing longer with every step. The more I ran, the farther away it became. Behind me, the breathing changed. It became wet, excited. I turned away from the kitchen and ran down another hall. This one had windows on both sides. Outside the glass were rural fields at dusk, but not the fields I knew. There were no houses, no barns, no roads, no fences, no cows, no horses. There was only corn, endless corn. It grew too tall and pressed close to the windows, the leaves scraping softly against the glass. The sky beyond it was blue, but it was too deep to be a real sky. It looked like water at the bottom of a well. Something walked between the rows. I could not see its full body, only the way the corn parted as it moved. The stalks bent away from it slowly, like they were afraid. Then something behind me touched my cap, just one finger. Light as a fly. I screamed, tore the covering from my head, and ran. I had never run uncovered before. Not like that. My hair and braid felt exposed, almost naked. Shame rose in me even through the terror, but I did not stop. I could hear the thing moving behind me now. It slapped along the walls and ceiling, keeping just out of sight. The sound reminded me of butter churning. Wet, heavy, steady. The hallway narrowed, the ceiling lowered. Soon I had to bend forward to keep moving. My shoulders scraped against the wallpaper. When I pulled away, some of it came off on my sleeve. It was wet underneath, like skin. The breathing behind me grew faster. At the end of the hall, the carpet stopped. There was a stairwell. No sign, no door, no railing. Just a black opening in the floor with narrow wooden steps leading down into nothing. I almost ran past it. Every part of me knew I should not go down. We do not go deeper into bad places. We do not follow darkness just because it offers a path. But the hallway behind me was filling with that wet, eager breathing. There was no other way. I looked down. An oil lantern hung from a nail beside the stairs. It looked like the kind we used at home. I grabbed it with both hands. My fingers were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped it. A small box of matches was wired to the handle. I struck one, almost burning my thumb, and touched the flame to the wick. A small yellow light came alive inside the glass. It did not make the darkness disappear, but it pushed it back a few feet. I started down the steps. At first, they were normal wooden steps. Then they became steeper, then smaller. Then there were too many of them, more than any stairwell should have. The walls pressed close on either side. The lantern swung in my hand, throwing shadows that climbed and folded over one another. I heard the thing above me. It did not come down the stairs like a person. It moved between them. I ran faster and missed a step. My foot slipped. I fell forward and struck my chin against the wood. Pain flashed through my jaw. My mouth filled with blood. The lantern almost went out. But somehow I kept hold of it. My phone flew from my pocket. It clattered down into the darkness below. Then it rang. The sound was so normal that it was more frightening than anything else. The screen lit up several steps below me. Home. I stared at it, frozen. No one at home had my number. I had barely learned how to use the phone myself. My parents did not have a phone in the house. We used the neighbor's phone only when we had to. Still, the screen said, home. I crawled down the steps toward it, my chin bleeding onto my dress. When I answered, the voice on the other end was mine, older, hoarse, broken. Elsie, the voice whispered. Please listen to me. Don't leave. I could not speak. Don't leave, she said again. Do not go farther. Do not choose wrong. Do not make me live what comes after. A hand shot through the space between two steps and grabbed my braid. It pulled so hard my head snapped backward. Pain tore through my scalp. I felt hair ripping out at the roots. I screamed and kicked, but there was nothing there to kick. The hand was calloused and cold. Its fingers were too long. Each finger seemed to have too many knuckles, bending in places no finger should bend. I bit down on it as hard as I could. Bitter, inky blood flooded my mouth. The thing made a sound like a calf being born wrong. The hand let go. I tumbled the rest of the way down the stairs. At the bottom, I landed on my side in a room full of hanging clothes. Plain dresses, aprons, black Sunday coats, white coverings. Hundreds of them hung from lines stretched across the room. They swayed gently, even though there was no wind. The lantern light moved across them, making them seem alive. I pushed through, trying not to touch them, but they brushed my face, my arms, my hair. Some of them had people inside, not bodies exactly, not living people, just shapes. Tall, still shapes standing under the cloth as if someone had hung clothing over a person who had forgotten how to move. I could feel them turn toward me as I passed. I ran so hard I lost one shoe, then the other. My bare feet hit carpet, then cold concrete, then soil. The rooms changed faster now, one opening into another with no sense or order. A schoolhouse with no children, only small slates on desks, each one scratched with my name. A barn with no animals, but every stall breathing in the dark. A church bench, slick with something dark and sticky. A kitchen where every drawer was open and full of baby teeth. A bedroom with a cradle rocking by itself. A room full of mirrors covered with black cloth. A field inside a room with corn growing straight up through the carpet. Behind me, the thing began using my voice. At first, it only called my name. Then it cried like me. Then it laughed like me. After that, it used my mother's voice. Come back home, child. The sound nearly broke me. I knew that voice. I knew every soft place in it, and every hard place, too. I knew how it sounded when she was tired, when she was worried, when she was trying not to cry. I understood what I was hearing. My mother must have gone into town. She must have borrowed a phone from a neighbor after I failed to come home. She must have called someone. Maybe my friend. Maybe the police. Maybe anyone she thought could find me. But the thing had heard her. And now it wore her voice like one of the hanging dresses. Come back home, child, it called again. I am home, it answered in my voice. No, my mother's voice said. You're running. Then the thing screamed another sentence, and I knew it was something I had said before. Maybe not out loud. Maybe only in my heart. Maybe I don't want your life. Maybe I want to be seen. The words struck me harder than the fall on the stairs. Because they were true. That was the worst part. I had wanted to be seen. Not as an Amish girl in a buggy. Not as a strange little picture for tourists. Not as someone's daughter, someone's future wife, someone's quiet helper. I had wanted to be seen as myself, even though I did not know who that self was. And somehow, that place knew it. It knew the hunger inside me. It knew the shame, too. I found a narrow door at the end of a crooked hall. It was not like the mall doors. It was not metal or glass. It was old wood, rough and plain, with a handmade latch. Our kind of latch. Simple, familiar. I stumbled toward it, sobbing. My hand reached for the wood. The thing hit me from behind. I fell hard against the door, and the lantern clanged against the floor. I felt its chest press against my back. It was thin, almost nothing but bone and skin, but it was strong. Its arms came around me, too long, folding over my shoulders and ribs. Its hands covered my eyes. At first, I thought it was trying to blind me. Then I realized it was trying to make me see. For 1 second, I saw through it. I saw endless rooms. I saw endless hallways, stairwells, fields, kitchens, barns, stores, churches, and rooms that looked like memories built wrong. I saw boys and girls running. Some were dressed plainly like me. Some wore jeans and hoodies. Some were old. Some were young. Some were crying. Some were silent. All of them were trying to get home. All of them were almost there. Always almost, never reaching it. I saw that the thing had chased them all. Or maybe it had been each of them once. Maybe it was made from every choice that turned sour, every regret that grew teeth, every future self begging the past to turn around. Then it opened its mouth beside my ear. There were no words inside it, only breath. I screamed and grabbed the lantern. I swung it backward with all the strength I had. The metal frame struck its face with a hard crack. The glass shattered. Burning oil splashed across its pale skin and old clothing. For the first time, I saw it clearly. It had my face. Not exactly as I was, but as I might be after many years of grief. Older, weathered, hollow-eyed, filled with a regret so deep it no longer looked human. Then the flames caught. The creature stumbled backward, shrieking in my voice as fire raced across its body. The heat hit my face and arms. Wallpaper curled away from the walls, blackening at the edges. The tiny blue flowers burned into little dark holes. The endless breathing became one terrible wail. Embers flew through the air and landed on my dress. My sleeves caught fire. For a moment, panic froze me in place. Then some old instinct took over. I slapped at the flames with both hands again and again, even when the pain in my palms became sharp and bright. Finally, the fire went out, leaving scorched cloth, burned skin, and the smell of smoke and hair. The thing was still screaming. I turned back to the door. My hands barely worked, but I lifted the latch. I shoved through on my hands and knees. Cold air hit my face. Real air. Morning air. I fell onto gravel behind a gas station outside Bird in Hand. For a few seconds, I could not understand where I was. The sky above me was pale and gray. The world smelled like gasoline, damp pavement, and coffee from inside the store. A truck engine rumbled nearby. Somewhere, an ice machine hummed. A trucker found me beside it. I had burned palms, no shoes, no cap. Blood dried down my neck, and my braid half torn apart. My dress was dirty and scorched. My mouth tasted like smoke and ink. He kept asking me what had happened. I could not answer. The police came, then the doctors, then my parents. Everyone asked questions. Where had I gone? Who had taken me? Had someone hurt me? Had I been attacked? Had I run away? How did I get from the mall to Bird in Hand? Why were my hands burned? Why was there blood in my hair? I told them I had gotten lost. That is the only lie I will keep. I came home. My parents never asked for every detail. Maybe they were afraid of the answer. Maybe they thought I had suffered enough. Maybe they believed I had seen something in the English world that they had always feared was there. They were just relieved I was alive. My mother held me for a long time. My father stood beside the stove, turning his hat in his hands. My little brothers stared at my bandaged palms and did not ask why I cried when the oil lamp flickered. For a while, I slept in my parents' room like a child. Most days, I can convince myself it was a dream brought on by fear. A strange dream. A terrible dream. Maybe I hit my head. Maybe I wandered in shock. Maybe some person hurt me and my mind built the rooms to hide the memory. Most of the time, that explanation is enough. Most of the time. But sometimes when I ride into town, I see movement at the edge of a field. A person standing where no person should be. Too tall, too still, pale, even in daylight. If I look directly, there is nothing there. A few days ago, I was helping my mother hang laundry behind the house. The sheets moved in the wind, white and soft, snapping gently on the line. My hands still hurt when I pinned them up, but I was getting better. Then I heard my name from beyond the fence line. Not my mother's voice, not my father's, mine. It called softly from the corn. Elsie. My mother did not seem to hear it. I kept my eyes on the laundry. I did not answer. Last Sunday, I told the bishop I had made my choice. I will be baptized. I will put away the phone, the internet, the music, the mall, the bright little windows that open into places no person was meant to stand. I will put away the English world and all the doors it hides inside itself. After that, I will not return to your world ever again. Maybe you think I was frightened back into my community. You are right. But fear is not always foolish. Sometimes fear is wisdom wearing a hard face. Sometimes fear is the fence that keeps the wolves out. Sometimes it is the hand on your shoulder before you step into the dark. Sometimes it is the voice that tells you not every open door leads somewhere you are meant to go. And sometimes, when the corn is high and the sky turns too deep a blue, fear is the only thing that keeps you from walking into the wolf's lair. Goodbye. Story 5. I hated shell game hustlers more than almost any other kind of thief. I hated the way they stood beside roads, fairs, and dirty little market corners with their cheap tables and quick hands. I hated how they smiled at poor fools and took their coins one by one. They were not even clever criminals. They were not artists. They were not performers. They were just roadside crooks with fast fingers and empty souls. To me, there was always a better way. If a man wanted to take money from people, he should at least give them something to remember. A gasp. A scream. A story they would repeat later in taverns, trains, kitchens, and dark bedrooms when the lamps were low. That was the difference between a common thief and a true entertainer. A thief took your money and disappeared. I took your money and left you wondering if the world still followed the rules you thought it did. That was my trade. I had a small traveling stage, a faded trailer, and several heavy boxes full of equipment. With those things, I moved from fair to fair across the continent. I slept in fields, behind circus tents, beside muddy roads, and sometimes in rooms above taverns, where the walls were thin and the beds smelled of smoke. I followed crowds the way flies follow fruit. Wherever people gathered, wherever music played and lights burned late into the night, I found a place for my act. I was not born into wealth. I was not born into fame. I was born with hands that could do things other people's hands could not. I discovered it when I was still young. My father was sitting at the kitchen table one evening, teaching me how to roll cigarettes. He smoked too much, and my mother hated it, but back then I thought everything he did was important. He placed the paper before me, sprinkled the tobacco, and showed me how to pinch and roll with the tips of my fingers. My first attempt should have been ugly. Should have fallen apart like any child's first try. But it did not. I rolled a perfect cigarette. Straight, tight, smooth, and clean. It looked better than the ones my father made after years of practice. He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at me as if I had just invented fire. After that, he tested me with other things. Coins, cards, thread, needles, small tools, locks, anything that needed careful touch. I learned quickly. Too quickly, maybe. My fingers seemed to understand things before my mind did. I could feel tiny edges, seams, springs, and weights that other people never noticed. A hidden line in a piece of metal was as clear to me as a crack in a window. My father said I had a gift. My mother said gifts always came with a price. Both of them died before I was fully grown. After they were gone, I never rolled another cigarette. I could not bear the feel of the paper between my fingers. It reminded me too much of the kitchen table, my father's tired smile, and my mother standing in the doorway pretending not to watch us. Some memories are soft when you look at them from far away, but if you touch them, they cut. So I left. I had no family to hold me down, no house to protect, no grave that called me back every morning. I was free to travel, and travel I did. I crossed borders, rivers, mountains, and long empty plains. I learned languages poorly and learned people very well. People were the same everywhere. They wanted to be fooled as long as the lie was beautiful enough. Years later, I reached the great fair of the island nations. The place was larger than most towns. It stretched across open land near the coast, full of painted tents, loud music, animal smells, fried food, cheap wine, and thousands of faces moving through smoke and lantern light. The air was wet and salty. Even the mud seemed different there. It clung to boots like it wanted to keep people from leaving. I secured a spot near the edge of the fairgrounds. It was not the best place, but it was quiet enough for what I planned. I put up my small tent, arranged my table, cleaned my coins, and waited. My first customer came just after sunset. He pushed the tent flap aside and stepped in with the careful look of a man who already expected to be cheated. He had a rough coat, sharp eyes, and hands that never stopped moving. He looked at the table, then at me. "Are you a shell game player?" he asked. I laughed softly and waved him toward the chair. "Oh, no," I said. "Nothing so boring. Sit down." He sat, though he did not relax. I placed several coins in front of him and let him inspect them. They were ordinary enough. That was important. People will doubt strange objects, but they trust simple ones. A coin is a coin. A needle is a needle. A knife is a knife. When the object looks real, the mind accepts the miracle more easily. My little act was simple. I could bend coins in the customer's own hand. It looked impossible, but it was only chemistry and timing. I rubbed the coins with my index finger, which had been coated with a special ingredient. Not enough to smell, not enough to see, just enough to weaken the metal for a short time. I placed a coin in the man's palm and told him to close his fist. Then I touched his knuckles, whispered a few useless words, and told him to open his hand. The coin was bent. His eyes widened. "Wow," he said. "How do you do that?" "Magic," I said. He stared at the coin, then looked up at me. "Impressive," he said. "Can you do that with knives too?" Before I could answer, he reached inside his coat and pulled out a blade. The smile left his face. "Either bend it," he said, "or hand over the money." I knew at once that this man was not joking. There was no audience to charm, no crowd to protect me, and no trick worth bleeding for. Magic, like pride, was not worth dying for. So I reached into the jar beside me and gave him everything I had earned that day. He took it without thanks, stepped backward out of the tent, and disappeared into the crowds. For a while, I sat alone in the fading light, listening to the fair outside. Music, laughter, shouting, bells, wheels turning, children crying, animals groaning. Life continued as if nothing had happened. That is one of the cruelest things about fear. When it grips you, you feel the whole world should stop and notice. It never does. That night, I packed my things and retired the coin trick forever. Fortunately, another fair was not far away. There, I could set up my real stage. A coin trick could be stolen by any knife-holding fool, but a stage act belonged to me. It needed timing, body language, courage, and control. It needed an audience. It needed breathless silence. It needed people to watch something that looked like death and then laugh because they were glad it had not happened to them. At 3:30 in the afternoon, the curtain opened. The crowd was not large at first. It never was at first. People drifted closer only when they sensed something might happen. That is the first rule of entertainment. You must not simply perform. You must sell the idea that the next moment matters. So I stepped forward, smiled, and gave them the line I had used many times before. My mother always told me people can get used to anything, I said. But I refused to believe it. The moment you get used to me, may lightning strike me dead. The introduction worked. A low murmur moved through the crowd. It was not quite fear, not quite excitement. It was like a scream trying to find a way out. My job was to open the door. I bent down and pulled a long needle from my boot. I held it high so the sunlight touched it. Then I walked to the front row and let several people inspect it. They turned it over in their hands. They pressed the tip. One man even pricked his thumb and cursed. Nobody noticed the fine seam that matched the edge of my right thumbnail perfectly. They handed the needle back. I looked across the audience, taking my time. Timing is everything. Too fast and they feel cheated. Too slow and they get bored. I raised my arm. I placed the needle against my skin. Then I activated the tiny mechanism hidden beneath my thumbnail and drove the needle through my arm. The front row screamed. For a split second, I knew something was wrong. The small blood capsule had not burst. Without blood, the trick was weak. Without blood, doubt could enter. So I grimaced, bent slightly as if fighting pain, and ran my hand over the wound. In that movement, I crushed the capsule unnoticed. Warm red liquid poured down my arm. The screams grew louder. I let the shock hang in the air. I let them stare at the needle, at the blood, at my face. Then, while the needle still appeared to pass through my flesh, I picked up 3 balls from the table and began to juggle. The audience laughed. It was not happy laughter. It was the kind of laughter that escapes people when fear has nowhere else to go. The applause came next, then cheers. Someone shouted my name, though I had not told them what it was. The job was done. After that, my life changed. Newspapers began writing about me, small papers first, then larger ones. They called me strange names: the painless man, the iron-blooded wonder, the man who could not be harmed. Eventually, one title stayed longer than the others: the impossible man. That name followed me from fair to fair. Before anyone could think too deeply about examining my body, I always directed their attention toward the tools. That was another rule. People believe objects more than flesh. They trust metal, glass, rope, and wire. They think a body can hide secrets, but a tool cannot. They are wrong, of course. Everything can hide secrets if you know where to put them. When I swallowed 10 needles at once, nobody suspected the magnet hidden inside the bottle. When I cut my tongue with a razor blade, nobody guessed it was a false tongue, placed carefully in my mouth. When I pressed hot metal against my skin, nobody noticed the coating that protected me for a few precious seconds. The tools were real enough to satisfy them. The pain was not. Over time, I learned to imitate pain perfectly. That was harder than the tricks themselves. Pain has rhythm. It changes the way a person breathes. It tightens the jaw, makes the eyes water at the corners. It bends the body before the mind has time to pretend. I watched injured men, sick children, dying animals, and drunk fighters after tavern brawls. I studied them all. I learned how pain lived in the face. Then I wore it like a mask. The show grew larger. More people came. More papers wrote. More fair owners paid me for better spots. I bought better curtains, brighter lamps, stronger boxes, and a trailer that did not leak as badly in the rain. I told myself I was becoming an artist. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was just becoming a better liar. Eventually, I returned to the island nation, this time not at the edge of a fair, but in the capital itself. That city was cold, beautiful, and cruel. Its streets were narrow near the old parts and wide near the government buildings. Its people dressed well and stared openly. They had the calm faces of people who believed they had already seen everything. I wanted to prove them wrong. For that performance, I stepped onto the stage carrying a long length of barbed wire. The crowd grew quiet at once. I handed the wire to several spectators so they could inspect it. Some cut themselves by accident. One woman gasped as a barb tore the skin of her finger. A man laughed nervously and wiped blood on his handkerchief. That was exactly what I needed. Their blood made my lie stronger. When the wire was returned to me, I used my thumbnail to prepare the hidden gaps and safe bends. Then I wrapped myself in it. It looked horrible. It always had to look horrible. The barbs appeared to press into my neck, arms, chest, and stomach. Hidden blood capsules did the rest. Red lines began to run over my skin. The crowd stopped breathing. Then I invited volunteers onto the stage. I chose strong men. That was important too. If I chose weak ones, the audience would doubt. I placed one end of the wire in one man's hands and the other end in another's. Then I told them to pull. As hard as you can, I said. They hesitated. I laughed at them and called them cowards. That worked. They pulled. The wire tightened around me. My body jerked. Blood ran faster. I screamed, but not too soon. A scream must be earned. If it comes too early, it sounds like theater. If it comes after silence, it sounds like truth. I delivered the performance of my life. The men pulled harder. I twisted, shook, and strained. The capsules burst one by one under pressure. Blood spread across my body and dripped onto the stage. The front rows began to move backward. Someone covered a child's eyes. Someone else stood up as if ready to stop the show. One volunteer let go. I cursed him and called for another. Another man came forward, pale but eager. He took the wire and pulled with all his strength. For a few moments, I almost believed I was really in pain. That is the danger of pretending for too long. The mask begins to warm against your face. It begins to feel like skin. "He's dying," someone shouted. "Stop!" The pulling ended. I stood bent over, breathing hard. My body looked torn apart. Blood covered my arms, my chest, my hands, and the wooden boards under my feet. Then slowly, very slowly, I straightened. The crowd stared. I smiled. With one violent movement, I tore myself free from the wire through what looked like sheer force. The barbs snapped loose. Blood flew across the stage. That was when people broke. Men and women fled the fairgrounds. They shoved past one another, tripped over benches, dropped hats, bags, and food. Some screamed, some laughed, some prayed. The rest remained frozen in place, watching me whistle softly while I cleaned the stage. People on the island still talk about that performance. I never returned after that. Not then. My thumbnail, my tricks, and my hunger for something greater eventually carried me farther. I crossed more borders. My fame grew stranger. Some loved me. Some feared me. Some said I was blessed. Others said I was cursed. A few said I was not human at all. I encouraged all opinions. At last, my travels brought me to the capital city of another country, a place even larger and hungrier than the last. There, I was scheduled to perform before hundreds of people in person and thousands more watching from far away through binoculars and raised viewing platforms. It was to be my greatest act. It needed to be more than pain. Pain had become too familiar. Even horror grows dull if repeated too often. My mother had been right. People can get used to anything. So I decided to die. Or at least I decided to make the world believe I had died. For the first time in my career, I hired help. His name was Young Eric. He was a circus attraction, though that was not the word they used when speaking politely. He had a smooth, bald head, small limbs, round cheeks, and the face of a child. People thought he was a boy. He was not. He was a man in his 40s, trapped in a small, childlike body. There was something wrong about him that I could never explain. Not his sigh, not his face, something behind his eyes. He watched people, the way a butcher watches meat hanging from hooks, calmly, carefully, without pity. I paid the circus director and borrowed him for a day. Young Eric helped me construct the water tank for my escape act. He was skilled with tools, and his small hands moved quickly. We checked the glass, the locks, the chains, the hinges, the false panel, the breathing tube, and every hidden release. I trusted mechanisms more than people, but even mechanisms could betray a man if built poorly. While we worked, young Eric told me he had once seen a man drown. Then he showed me what it looked like. He dropped to the floor, clawed at his throat, kicked his legs, rolled his eyes, and made a wet, choking sound so real that I felt my stomach tighten. His little body shook in a way that was not comic or dramatic. It was ugly. It was animal. It was death entering through the mouth. When he finished, he stood up and smiled. I chose not to ask questions. On May 13th, 1943, the world believed I was drowning. The tank stood in the center of the stage beneath the white lights. I allowed the chains and locks to be inspected. The glass was tapped. The water was examined. The audience leaned forward, hungry for fear. I could feel their attention pressing against my skin. They lowered me into the tank. Cold water closed over my head. At first, everything went as planned. My wrist slipped from the first bind. My thumb found the release. I twisted my shoulders, let the chains shift, and counted slowly. The trick was not to escape too early. That would disappoint them. The trick was to wait until hope was almost gone. Through the glass, I saw faces blur and stretch. People stood up, some pointed. The lights shimmered above me. My lungs began to ache, but not dangerously. Not yet. I shook my body as young Eric had shown me. I kicked. I opened my mouth and let bubbles rush out. I made my eyes wide. I looked like a man losing the fight. The audience believed. The seconds stretched. At the last possible moment, I found the hidden panel and escaped. When I came out, my face was blue, my clothes were soaked, and my body shook hard enough to convince even those nearest to me. I fell to my knees, coughed water onto the stage, and looked weakly toward the wings. Young Eric stood backstage, half hidden by shadow. I gave him a subtle nod. The audience erupted. The applause was not just loud, it was violent. It crashed over me. People stood, clapped, shouted, and stamped their feet. Some looked close to tears. They had watched a man die and return. Or so they thought. The job was done. And then I noticed them. 3 men near the front. They were obvious islanders. I recognized the cut of their coats, the shape of their faces, the way they stood close together without speaking. My heart did not jump. It slowed. That was part of the plan. They rushed the stage. The audience laughed at first, thinking it was part of the act. Then the first blade flashed. The men reached me and stabbed me 23 times. The knives were real, but the strikes had been arranged, locations chosen, angles practiced, blood packs hidden beneath my clothes, plates set where needed. It was the greatest illusion I had ever built, and it depended on panic. No one counts carefully when they are screaming. But then young Eric ran out from the side. I saw him for only a second before he reached me. He had not been told. He stabbed me once as well. That one was not part of the plan. Pain burst through me, bright and clean and shocking. Real pain. Not studied, not performed, not borrowed from the faces of dying men. My body knew the difference at once. Young Eric fled with everyone else. I collapsed onto the stage. The crowd ran for their lives. The screaming became distant. The lights above me blurred. Everything grew darker around the edges. My final sight, as far as the audience knew, was the expanding pool of blood beneath my body. It looked perfect. Too perfect, maybe. The 3 islanders carried my body into a patch of forest behind the fairgrounds. They moved quickly, breathing hard, swearing under their breath. Once we were out of sight and the trees hid us from the world, they lowered me to the ground. For a moment, I stayed still. Then I opened my eyes and stood up. One of the men cursed and stumbled backward, even though he knew the truth. I pressed my hand against my side. My fingers came away wet with real blood. "One of you idiots actually hit me," I said. "We agreed on the locations." The tallest islander wiped sweat from his face. "It worked, didn't it?" he said. I wanted to strike him, but he was right. It had worked. Back at the stage, people believed they had seen me murdered. By morning, newspapers would carry the story. By night, the impossible man would be dead. The legend would become stronger than the body. And someday, when enough time had passed, I would return to the island nations. Not as a performer, not as a magician, not as a man wrapped in wire or locked in a tank.